seems to be a sentiment around that Bonecrusher Smith
has the deadliest punch in all boxing.
We took him out of his full-time job as a prison guard, put him into boxing full-time, and he started cracking skulls.
Mike Tyson has never faced an opponent that can take him out with one punch. He will go out.
Every man's a problem. You know, every man, no one should be taken lightly. But James Smith is about to meet his nightmare.
Mike Tyson had already reached a point where his reputation could enter the ring before he did. At just 20 years old, he was no longer simply a promising heavyweight. He was the WBC champion, undefeated, and becoming one of the most feared fighters in the sport. Opponents knew what waited for them. Tyson was faster than most heavyweights, more explosive than almost anyone his size, and once he got close, his combinations could turn a competitive fight into a sudden ending.
Iron Mike Tyson.
But in March 1987, Tyson was walking into a different kind of challenge. Across from him stood a man who wasn't impressed by the hype. James Bonecrusher
Smith.
Smith was older, bigger, and carrying something Tyson had rarely been forced to deal with, a belief that he could actually hurt him. Smith didn't just think he could survive Tyson. He believed he could knock him out. Las Vegas was packed for the meeting. Tyson was defending his WBC championship while chasing the WBA title, and a victory would bring him one step closer to becoming the undisputed heavyweight champion. Everything seemed to be moving in Tyson's direction. Except the man standing across the ring. James Smith had taken a very different road to the heavyweight championship. Before boxing made him a champion, life had already taught him how to deal with pressure. He had served in the United States Army, and it was during his time stationed in Germany that he first began boxing seriously. After returning home, Smith eventually worked as a correctional officer. For years, he spent his days around prisoners and dangerous men, surrounded by an environment where intimidation could mean everything. That experience shaped him. Smith developed a calmness that didn't come from confidence alone. He had spent years learning not to react emotionally when confronted with danger. And now he was about to step into a ring with the most intimidating young fighter in boxing.
They're not holding back anything, I promise you that. Oh, what a punch up, right away he did. Too disturbed at this point, well, he's already sampled a few. Going to hang on for dear life. He's going to stick to him like a barnacle by the look of it. Oh, and again there.
Physically, Smith had every reason to believe he could create problems. He stood around 6 feet 4 inches, weighed more than 240 pounds, and possessed the kind of right hand that could change a fight instantly. The nickname Bonecrusher wasn't marketing. Smith had earned it. By the time he arrived in Las Vegas, he had already won 19 professional fights, with 14 coming by knockout. But the victory that truly changed his reputation had happened only a few months earlier. Smith had entered the ring against WBA champion Tim Witherspoon as a massive underdog. Few expected him to leave with the title. Instead, one devastating punch changed everything. Witherspoon went down in the first round, and Smith suddenly found himself holding a heavyweight championship belt. That victory gave Bonecrusher something even more valuable than the title. Belief. He had already proven that a single punch could change the course of a fight against a world champion. So when people told him Mike Tyson was different, Smith didn't seem interested in listening. He openly insisted that Tyson had never faced anyone capable of putting him away with one clean shot. If his best punch landed, Smith believed Tyson would not get back up. It was an extraordinary claim. But unlike most pre-fight talk, Smith had evidence behind it. And Tyson knew exactly what kind of danger stood in front of him.
He is persistent fouling. Oh, and you don't get disqualified in an American ring unless it's really... Corner, again he's wiping the blood away from his eye there. They're shouting out, don't wait in Tyson's...
The young champion had become accustomed to opponents being overwhelmed by his pressure. They would try to survive the opening assault, and once Tyson found his range, the fight would quickly become his. But Smith wasn't planning to give him that opportunity. He understood that fighting Tyson in open space could be a disaster. So instead of trying to prove that he could match Tyson punch for punch, Smith prepared to take away the thing Tyson needed most: space. When the bell finally rang, the contrast between the two fighters became obvious. Tyson wanted to close the distance and turn the fight into a series of violent exchanges. Smith wanted to make that impossible. He used his size. He used his weight. And whenever Tyson tried to get inside, Smith tied him up and forced the younger champion to work in close quarters.
Ahead because Bonecrusher just hasn't done it. Coming up for the fourth then. And I'm just wondering whether this could have happened to Bonecrusher, because he's just not, when they get past the great divide, the age of 30, in camp that this fellow, Mike, intimidates his opponents. And
It wasn't the kind of fight the crowd had imagined. They had come expecting another Tyson explosion. Instead, Smith was making the champion work for every opportunity. But there was a reason for it. Smith knew that Tyson's greatest danger came when he could establish a rhythm. The peekaboo movement. The sudden entries. The short hooks. The combinations that came from angles opponents struggled to see. If Tyson was allowed to create that rhythm, Smith could be finished. So he refused to cooperate. He stayed close. He disrupted the exchanges. He made the fight physical. And slowly, the night began to take on a completely different shape. Tyson was still the faster man. He was still landing the cleaner punches. But Smith had accomplished something most of Tyson's opponents couldn't. He had prevented the champion from fighting comfortably. That alone made the fight dangerous. Because Tyson's reputation had created an unusual expectation around him.
round 7, taken him 7 rounds to get through, and he's trying to laugh at it now, Smith. And it's a tough game, this, when you can be hit on the chin and laugh, I tell you.
Winning wasn't always enough. People expected destruction. They expected opponents to collapse. They expected the young champion to make heavyweight boxing look almost effortless. Smith wasn't interested in giving them that. He wasn't there to make Tyson look spectacular. He was there to make him uncomfortable. And the longer Smith stayed on his feet, the more important that became. For the first time in Tyson's championship career, the knockout wasn't arriving on schedule. The young champion had to find another way. And Smith had just forced him into the kind of fight that would reveal whether Tyson was more than a devastating puncher. Because eventually, every great fighter reaches the same question. What happens when your opponent refuses to give you the fight you want? Against James "Bonecrusher" Smith, Mike Tyson was about to find out.
Almost hit him on the floor there, and he crossed his feet there. There was no knockdown, the referee Mills lane. Well, that was what's trading, Smith. This is what we've been waiting for. That's the best round for Smith there at the end for round 8.
Smith remained physically difficult to deal with, and his size continued to make every exchange complicated. But Tyson was still the younger, fresher fighter. And as the rounds continued, the difference in their approach became clearer. Smith was trying to survive Tyson. Tyson was trying to solve Smith. And neither man was willing to give the other exactly what he wanted. The question was no longer whether Tyson could knock Smith out quickly. That opportunity had already begun to disappear. The real question was whether the young champion could remain disciplined when the knockout refused to come. Because for the first time, Tyson wasn't simply fighting an opponent. He was fighting the expectations that had been built around him. Every round that passed without a stoppage felt unusual. Every time Smith survived, the pressure grew. But Tyson kept moving forward. And as the fight entered its later stages, the teenager who had become famous for ending fights early was about to discover something completely different about himself. He could go the distance. He could stay patient. And he could win without getting the spectacular ending everyone expected. As the fight moved into the later rounds, something unusual was becoming clear. James "Bonecrusher" Smith was still standing. For a fighter whose reputation had been built around knockout after knockout, Tyson was entering unfamiliar territory. He had already gone deeper into a fight than most people expected, yet Smith continued to find ways to frustrate him. But Smith's survival came at a cost. He was spending more and more of the fight trying to avoid Tyson rather than trying to win it. The holding continued, the movement continued, and the referee repeatedly had to step in. Tyson, meanwhile, refused to lose his composure. He kept cutting the distance, looking for openings, and forcing Smith to work. Whenever Smith tried to escape, Tyson followed. Whenever he tried to tie him up, Tyson worked his way free. By the 8th round, Smith finally began taking more chances. For the first time in a while, he stood and exchanged with Tyson instead of immediately smothering the action. It produced some of the most dangerous moments of the fight, and Smith showed exactly why his power had earned him the nickname Bone Crusher. But Tyson absorbed the danger and kept coming. That was becoming the story of the night. Smith had promised that one clean punch would end Tyson's reign. Instead, Tyson was proving that he could take whatever Smith had and continue moving forward. The longer the fight lasted, the more impressive that became. Tyson was now fighting into territory he rarely visited. The 10th round arrived, then the 11th, and the young champion was still carrying the same energy he had shown at the opening bell.
The 10th round, scheduled for 12, this unification of the heavyweight championship of the world, showing up some of the limitations with the young terror. But Bonecrusher just... if Tyson can draw Smith into a fight, just standing there and trading level with him, and he's got more chance.
Smith had tried almost everything available to him: strength, size, clinching, movement, and finally exchanges. None of it had been enough to take control. And Tyson had learned something important in the process. Not every fight was going to end with a spectacular knockout. Sometimes, becoming a champion meant having the patience to win when the perfect opening never appeared. By the time they entered the 12th and final round, the outcome was essentially decided. Smith had survived, but Tyson had controlled the fight. The final bell finally arrived, ending one of the strangest challenges of Tyson's early reign. There was no dramatic knockout. No collapse. No spectacular finish. Instead, the judges delivered a unanimous decision in Tyson's favor, with scores of 120-106, 119-107, and 119-107. Mike Tyson had successfully unified the WBC and WBA heavyweight titles. But the victory meant more than another belt. For the first time, Tyson had been forced to win a fight on a different set of terms. James Smith had refused to give him the fight he wanted, and Tyson had still found a way through it. The knockout everyone expected never came. But something else did. A glimpse of the fighter Tyson could become when raw destruction wasn't enough. The terrifying young heavyweight had been tested, not by someone who could overpower him, but by someone determined not to let him fight his fight. And Tyson had passed that test.
Final round then of this heavyweight championship, and a nice fella on the way in before he's about to perform. As I said before, it's a bit like the dentist. Can either one of them really pull off that both saturated with water of Las Vegas. Really is immensely fit, Tyson, that's for sure, because he's still got a lot of spring in his legs.
The legend was still growing. But now, the world had seen another side of Mike Tyson. Not just the knockout artist. The champion who could adapt, stay patient, and go the distance when he had to. The final bell also left Tyson with something he had rarely experienced before, a fight that had not ended on his terms. Smith had walked into the ring promising that Tyson had never faced anyone who could take him out with one punch. Instead, he became the man who survived all 12 rounds with him. That mattered. Because Tyson's reputation had become so powerful that anything short of a knockout could almost feel like a disappointment. But beneath the missing finish was a victory that told a much bigger story. Tyson had been forced to deal with a bigger opponent who constantly tied him up, disrupted his rhythm, and refused to give him clean opportunities. He had been pushed deeper into a fight than he was accustomed to, yet his energy never disappeared. Smith had survived, but he had not solved Tyson. The judges' scorecards made that clear. Tyson won comfortably, unified the WBC and WBA heavyweight titles, and remained undefeated. And perhaps most importantly, the fight showed that Tyson's dominance wasn't built entirely on knockouts. He could adapt. He could stay composed. And when an opponent refused to give him the perfect fight, Tyson could still find a way to win. For James "Bone Crusher" Smith, surviving 12 rounds was its own kind of achievement. He had entered the fight as a dangerous champion with genuine knockout power, and he left having exposed one of the few ways to slow Tyson down. But he also revealed something about Tyson that the knockout highlights never could. The young champion could be frustrated without being broken. He could be denied his favorite weapon without losing control. And he could walk through 12 rounds against a man who had spent the entire night trying to make him uncomfortable. The heavyweight division had just learned an important lesson. Mike Tyson didn't have to knock you out to beat you. And as he moved closer toward becoming the undisputed heavyweight champion, that realization made him even more dangerous. Because the knockout power was already there. Now, Tyson was beginning to prove he had something else too, the discipline to win when destruction wasn't an option.